In our big picture segment today, it gives me great pleasure to bring on board Rahul Bhasin to talk about two themes he's excited about. So we'll talk to Rahul. Rahul, thank you for joining us and thank you for being part of the big picture. The two themes which you identified, let's discuss one by one. First, your views, and then we'll get into a conversation with the company and managements there. The EV space. Why are you so excited about the EV space at the current juncture? The big picture for EV is simple. Yes, that's a trend which is here to stay. But some would argue, looking at the valuations of some of the EV companies in world and even in India like Tata Motors, don't you think for an investor, while this sector will grow, the low-hanging fruits have been plucked?
So, Nikunj, this always happens. Investors inevitably end up paying too much for growth and not calculating risks. This is part of human nature. But I think that let's step back and look a little bit, more closely as to why this phenomenon takes place and as to what lies ahead of us. If you think about the entire EV space, why is everybody so excited? Because the EV cars and vehicles, whether it's two-wheelers, four-wheelers, trucks, they all use energy, right? And is it that you're just displacing the energy and sort of having the power plant consume the energy and you're not consuming it? Is this just some kind of fiction? Actually, it's not. The reality is that the most efficient internal combustion engine which exists and works today uses only about 30% of the fuel or the energy which is consumed in actual motion. 70% is lost in heat. EVs use, the most inefficient EV uses 96, 97% of the energy which is generated in motion, and only 2 or 3% is lost in heat. Now, this is a step change in efficiency, and it to my mind is such a big momentous change that it is going to drive the entire industry in this direction. There is, of course, various questions of economics involved. There is the question of geopolitics involved in this. In the Indian context, if you think of EV, what will first, where will you get the first adoption? It will be in the two-wheeler space. Why will it be in the two-wheeler space? Because the batteries that you need are much smaller, weaker. You can, and there is a high amount of consumption there. The price sensitivity of usage is low. I'm sorry, the price sensitivity is in fact high. I'm sorry, I'm saying the exact opposite thing. And the total cost of ownership already in two-wheelers has shifted to the EV space. Now, the biggest issue is about charging of the batteries, and various people have found battery swapping solutions, which I think is where the market is going to go. But I also believe that batteries which can be easily taken out and charged in your home and put back are also solutions which are going to work. And I think if you look at the combination of these, I think the market is already here. The big challenge, and I said, geopolitics plays a big role. EVs use lithium-ion batteries. The lithium-ion batteries and the motors use magnets which use neodymium. Both lithium processing, neodymium processing are totally controlled by China. So suddenly you're changing your dependency from the Gulf states and the OPEC into China, and I think that has geopolitical implications, and therefore, to my mind, has policy implications. So the big challenge is that how do you get hold of lithium? How do you get hold of things like neodymium, etc. Available to you so that you're not strategically in a weaker spot. But there is also the issue, to my mind, of costs associated with some of these things. And the third thing is there is the entire issue of pollution. What happens to the batteries or the motors which are used in EV vehicles at the end of their life? If you throw them into landfills, you will get lead poisoning, nickel, mercury, cadmium, a whole bunch of toxic heavy metals which are going to pollute the environment. So that's not a viable solution. And the world is suddenly figuring out that they need to come out with a solution for that whole space. And that brings me to another theme which fits into this, the extended product liability, which I think is something which is getting adopted more and more in Europe. You can see the early signs of it in places like America, but I think it is inevitable in a highly populated country like India. So I think EV adoption will take place, but you will also have concomitantly, you will also have the companies having to worry about what do they do with the battery at the end of the life. And I think that both of these themes together are going to throw up opportunity sets which are fairly unique in the Indian context.
Great point. So just to, and again, I need to be in devil's advocate. Perhaps that's part of my job, to be in television anchor. To charge EV, you need electricity. And we know that in India, electricity infrastructure is still a pain. I was reading a Morgan Stanley report and it's talking about a US comparison that nearly $500 billion will be required to create the EV infrastructure. Do you think in India that is the biggest challenge? Like the need, the desire, the experience of EV, everything is fine, but भैया गाड़ी तो चार्ज करनी पड़ेगी, बिजली कहाँ है?
I think, this is a very similar discussion to what was had when mobile phones came about, right? That mobile towers need electricity. How will you solve that problem? I remember roughly 20 years ago, this was the biggest theme that mobile is never going to work in India. But today that, almost every adult Indian has a mobile phone in their pockets. I think you will go through a similar journey. You will go through ups and downs as far as that is concerned. But we will solve this problem. And look, it's less polluting. The EVs are less polluting. You don't have, methane. You don't have various kinds of toluene, etc., which are common pollutants in larger cities, which are poisonous for human beings as a consequence of EV. So I think that we will go there. But there are lot of supply chain issues and constraints on the way, and I think that they will get tackled. I think EV is here to stay. It's not going away in a hurry. Though personally, my own view is that if I were to put myself in the shoes of a policymaker, I think in India what you will end up seeing is a hybrid model. Just because I think geopolitically they wouldn't want to put themselves in a position where they're solely dependent on one supply chain. So you'll probably have CNG, you'll have some part of the IC engine regime persisting. If you put yourself in the shoes of the automobile industry, they've invested very heavily in the IC engine to comply with BS6. And suddenly they find the market shifting under their feet to the EV space. I think they'll fight to retain some of that space and to at least utilize the capacity, the capex which they have already done. So you will see a mix. You will see directionally things moving towards the EV space, but it will go there. Now we can sort of sit here and contemplate whether the Tesla valuation makes sense or not. And I think you have to understand rather than I think I would say that I would not buy Tesla at these prices. I mean, it's not that it's traded in India, but the reality is, what is the market saying? The market saying is that these guys have IP on several battery technologies. They also have IP in terms of using of IoT to make their vehicles better as they age, as against vehicle which sort of deteriorates in performance as it ages. And it's a cleaner technology. It's more fuel efficient. It has better performance metrics. It's noiseless. So you've got basically a new paradigm, and the world is making a bet that investors are making a bet that we are going to move to this new paradigm. And I think that that's true. That's a correct bet. What price you pay for it, like I said, human emotion tends to get ahead of itself. And there will be challenges. I think if you look at the electric two-wheeler space in India, I know of at least 40 companies who've started up there, and it's there's nothing to say that A will win or B will win. I think it's to my mind also, if you look at the structure of the two-wheeler industry from largely an oligopolistic structure, it's going to move to much more perfect competition kind of structure. So nobody will make that much of money in that part of the value chain, but there are opportunities in the supply chain which I think would make a tremendous amount of sense because that value chain is far more concentrated.
You've laid the foundation and talked about the various challenges from supply chain to also pricing. Now, while you're convinced that the EV market is really opening up from the two-wheeler space, and we are seeing that as well, and primarily B2B, like you pointed out, the cost is much more. Compared to an ICE bike of 40,000 rupees, you're looking at EV of what? 70,000 as a starting price in most cases. Do you think India will also follow a model we've seen in other countries, or maybe debundling the battery? Is there opportunities maybe in battery swapping, community battery sharing?
So I was talking about the reusage of batteries, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity in that whole space, and there's opportunity in recycling batteries so that we have a cleaner environment, less toxic environment. And I think that we have the good fortune of having Rajat from Lohum on this call, and I think that maybe we should include him in the conversation and get his viewpoint and perspective on this, because the single biggest challenge to me is what do you do with the battery at the end of its life in a larger vehicle, and how do you sort of make sure that there's a product does not cause societal damage at the end of its life, and how do you reuse things so that we end up with a more sustainable long-term model. And I think Rajat and Lohum play right dead and center into that space, and I think that maybe we can ask Rajat about that opportunity set, and how much, if you leave a lithium-ion battery and you throw it in a landfill, what's it going to do to society?
Absolutely. The entire point of EVs is going green. It's about sustainability. So let's ask Rajat Verma that. We do have him on this call. Rajat Verma, the CEO of Lohum. Good morning. So that's Rahul Bhasin's question for you as well. What happens to the batteries once they're done? You can't dispose them at the landfill with the larger conversation that's going on. So there must be a big opportunity there as well.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. So I think Rahul's touched upon this theme in the earlier part of this conversation. Batteries certainly are the most expensive component in an electric vehicle. And so we really have to figure out what can we do with a battery when it reaches its end of life in an electric vehicle for multiple reasons. The reason number one, of course, is the larger purpose why we are moving to electric vehicles is to decarbonize energy. And decarbonization can happen significantly if we learn how to reuse and recycle. Just to share with you some numbers, if you actually use an electric vehicle with recycled cells, you have reduced the carbon footprint by approximately 44%. And if you have a battery pack made with reused cells, you've decreased the carbon footprint by approximately 81%. So if we keep the larger goal that we all have in mind, which is how do we really reduce the carbon footprint of all our activities, reuse and recycling are super, super critical. Needless to say, because batteries are so expensive, reuse and recycling also helps us bring down the cost of the battery pack across the ecosystem. I mean, the same cost that went into making a battery pack is now getting amortized across a lot more cycles. And fundamentally, if you learn how to reuse and recycle, then you're also making a lot of other use cases viable and viable vis-a-vis, let's say, traditional forms of energy. And those are sort of three critical reasons why we at Lohum decided to go into reuse and recycling. And, again, Rahul had touched a little bit upon this. Let's not forget the most important bit out here, which is this market is going to be very supply chain challenged, and access to raw material is super, super critical. Most of us know that India does not have some of these fundamental raw materials. A lot of countries in the world don't have this raw material. So how do you break the hegemony of certain countries which dominate the raw material and the raw material refining space? And so again, from that perspective, that reuse and recycling solution to battery packs becomes important. Now, if I just touch upon the environmental theme here, battery packs have some really, really heavy metals in them, cobalt, nickel, manganese. They have some very toxic elements present in them, such as various kinds of fluorides. And if we don't recycle them well, these are going into landfills, these are going into the environment in general, and can cause enormous amounts of grief. We all know what fluoride did, what fluoride emissions did in large parts of the world before we started putting constraints on them. And if we just let go of waste matter like this, and prior to electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries were being used significantly in consumer electronics, and a lot of this consumer electronic material was going into landfills, and there was a lot of leaching of cobalt, nickel, fluoride into the local environment. So it's very, very important that we recycle it, but more important that we recycle it correctly. A lot of people will try to get into the recycling space in lithium-ion batteries without having the necessary technology. And what we have focused on is to get our technology right first. We developed a state-of-the-art technology wherein we, of course, perfected the art of extracting all the material from lithium-ion batteries, but also perfected the art of ensuring that we have no solid, liquid, or gaseous emissions into the environment. And now we are in a journey of expanding our business and recycling more and more lithium-ion batteries.
Rajat, can you just expand on the entire opportunity set of reusing the batteries before you reach the stage of recycling? Because again, that is so friendly to the environment. It also makes economic sense. And it totally lowers the cost of the entire system. Because if a battery has life, the battery life is not zero, and you've reached a point when you can't use it anymore, suddenly the total cost of ownership of whether it's a two-wheeler or any electric vehicle comes down significantly and makes the whole system economically competitive and viable even today. So will you just expand on the reuse case?
Absolutely. So what does happen, for those of you who are not very familiar with the technology of lithium-ion battery packs, battery pack typically will be discarded from its first application after it reaches approximately 80% of its original capacity. So if a battery pack is degraded by about 20%, the battery pack is considered not very relevant for that original application, which in this case will be an electric vehicle application. So the pack comes out, and then you try to figure out what you do, because there's still a lot of useful capacity left in that pack. So what do you do with that? And there are multiple different things we can do with it, particularly in a nation like India. We can put them into low power mobility applications. We've got a lot of different low power mobility applications in the form of three-wheelers and two-wheelers, but we can also put them in use in stationary storage. And the advantage, as Rahul was mentioning, is that my original battery pack, which let's say was costing me somewhere between $150 to $200 a kilowatt hour, now suddenly will cost me, let's say, somewhere in the range of $80 to $100 a kilowatt hour. So I've suddenly made that battery pack very, very viable in the next application, and have made it competitive with the traditional sources of energy. How large is this opportunity? I mean, if you look at it globally, pretty much everyone knows that the battery packs after coming out of electric vehicles will need to be put into a reuse application. The OEMs expect it, the customers expect it, the dealers expect it, because that's how they will realize the most money. Realization of dollars in reuse versus recycling is almost 5 to 7x. So needless to say, the market will tilt towards reusing. And the critical thing to figure out in reusing is, how do we reuse? What application do we reuse it in? And ultimately, how do we provision a warranty on that application? How do you determine what the remaining useful life is? But purely from an opportunity perspective, if there is a forecasted battery pack market of $300 billion, the first derivative of that market really is reuse, which will be approximately 50 to 70% of the primary market. And then the second derivative will be recycling.
Rajat, just to take that point forward, if indeed this is such a lucrative industry, I'm guessing there will be increased competition as well, and there will come a point when margins and EBITDA levels are going to get challenging with too many players in this space. Do you see that happening, given the prospects of the industry which you just highlighted?
So, of course, in any industry, if you're not differentiated, the market will become very competitive, margins will erode. But this is a difficult problem. And, at Lohum, we fundamentally are a deep technology company. The core of all our activities is technology, technology, and technology. The reuse problem is not an easy problem. seemingly it may you may feel like, okay, one can take a battery pack and put it into another application, but there are lots and lots of there's a lot of science involved behind repurposing that, and that science really resides in data. Where Loham has gained significant leadership is the fact that we've been collecting and analyzing this data for the last 4 years, and we've actually put it out into many different applications, both on the stationary and the mobility side. And the amount of data that we have clocked so far is probably the highest, not just within India, but globally, in terms of what to do when a battery pack comes back from its first life. And we, needless to say, we continue building on that data. We continue evaluating first life performance, second life performance, and that makes our ability to provision warranty the most efficient in the market.
Rahul, we were using the telecom example, so let's take that example. And the example was that the telecom market, in a sense, is still ruled by the incumbents, which is that Bharti is still the dominant one. There are a lot of other players which came, the market became a large market, and today it's reduced to almost 2 players. I would say 2.5 players. If I say 3, then others would remind me that Vodafone Idea is not in full bloom. How do you see this entire battery industry evolving? There would be an innovator, there would be a disruptor, and there would be a challenger.
Sure enough. So I think, again, remember the battery industry, technically in India, is a very old industry. We've had lead acid batteries around for a long time, and lead acid batteries have played their role both in mobility and stationary storage for a long time. And that market became somewhat oligopolistic, particularly in India. Now, in the lithium-ion battery market, again, where we see a lot of competition in the first life batteries, which really is, the original battery packs that get made. I think that market will probably, again, see a lot of competition. A lot of players will compete. That is a primary market, and that is where everyone is focusing their activities at the moment. But like I said, we at Lohum are very clear. We expect, we are playing out the derivative markets, the second life and the recycling market, which are both very, very technology focused. A lot of data, a lot of chemistry, a lot of chemical engineering goes into the activities that we play out. And I don't expect this market to become super competitive, at least in times to come. The primary battery market, as we say, it is more of an assembly market. And there, in our opinion, the winner will be the person who has access to raw material. That is super, super critical. Now, in India, no one has access to raw material. And I do believe we at Lohum will play a very significant role because we'll be provisioning that raw material to the primary market. So the government has come out with a PLI scheme for cell manufacturing. But you can only be as good a cell manufacturer as your access to the raw material that goes into cell manufacturing. Today, China dominates its supply chain significantly. And if India wants to be competitive, India needs to figure out how to get its raw material. And when you talk about incumbents, innovators, disruptors, challengers, I think the real disruption in this market is
Right. Right. All right, Rajat, really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. It's an evolving space for us, but the way, Rahul and you brilliantly broken the whole battery market, the nuances for us, it's quite extraordinary. Rahul Bhasin, let's shift gears and talk about the other big theme which you're talking about, and that is AI. Now, this AI, Rahul, when we say, is like saying, it's like saying that today we need food and water, because everything we today, in a sense, are associating with, whether it is travel, whether it is surfing, whether it is a day-to-day activity, it is associated with artificial intelligence. It reminds me of the movie Matrix, which I saw a couple of years ago, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I think the impact on our lives of artificial intelligence today is far more than any one of us realize. I mean, the bottom line is that there is so much analytics going on in the background, and this analytics is getting better and better. Whether it's in us accessing the credit markets in some way, or whether it's even travel or our consumption habits, or at a lot of things on the medical and the health side, with different variables, personalization of these kinds of things, and um, you know, we have the good fortune of having Vinayak with us from Touch. The entire space in terms of how do you look at even videos and live streaming images and have artificial intelligence applied to very relevant and use cases there. I think one of the big challenges and issues has been, and if you look historically, there was search available and there was ability to, in terms of data, in terms of text, and Google mastered this space, almost 2 decades ago. They found ways of basically adopting a library management system and to a ability to search for data and specific kinds of information uh, from around the world. But now if you look at people like YouTube, etc., and you look at how much of video content that is now in public domain, you look at how much of new content is made for entertainment, for education, for sport, almost on a continuous basis, or even for security, you will find that there is tremendous amount of image and video content being created, but there is now also a lot of scope of being able to identify sentiment, emotion, intention, aggression, all of these kinds of things through videos. And you're able to identify context when someone should be in a particular place, shouldn't be in a particular place. You're able to identify, highlights in sporting events. All of these kinds of things are now possible using artificial intelligence, but inevitably to be able to use it and to commercialize it, you need you need entrepreneurs with that kind of foresight and energy. And I'm glad that we have Vinayak with us from Touch, because Touch has developed an ability to learn, and they have these AI algorithms which learn about images and evolving images, not just static images. And I think that they've managed to come out with multiple applications and use cases for that. Now, if I were to step back a little bit again, and before we bring Vinayak into the conversation, artificial intelligence is impacting everything in our lives at a very, very fundamental level. And I think that if we don't recognize it, I think that even the asset management industry, which I belong to, is going to get thoroughly, and a lot of white collar jobs are going to be impacted very severely with artificial intelligence. And I think that people owe it to themselves to learn about artificial intelligence and the consequences. One, as to what they can do, how they can do their jobs better by using it, but also at a more fundamental level, how to make sure that they stay relevant in the new world. Because if they don't learn it and they don't learn the consequences of it, and they don't, I think it's going to be expensive for them. As far as the investing world is concerned, the competitive dynamic of so many industries is going to evolve and change.
Right.
And the pace of disruption today is so high, and it's being accelerated by AI at several levels. So again, it's something which any investor, if they haven't done it yet, needs to go and do a course on AI and learn about it and learn about where and how it can be applied.
Right, in fact, like Mr. Bhasin said, we've got Vinayak Shrivastav, the co-founder and CEO of Toch.ai, with us here on the big picture on the market. Good morning, Vinayak. You heard Rahul's question, so over to you.
Good morning, guys. I'll quickly take a minute here to just explain the audience here what we exactly do. We're a company that's driven by identifying emotions, attributes, activities in a content and create key moments and highlights. The reason why we do this using so much of data points today is the way content consumption has changed over the last, I would say, 2 years. And the amount of content that's been created in the last 2 years has been equal to the content that's been created in the last 10 years. So because of so much amount of content out there, people are actually moving over to watching shorter form of content. The reason why short form video platforms are growing aggressively is because there is a need for consuming content in a short period of time. That's where we really come in. We've realized that a lot of companies, a lot of broadcasters, a lot of publication houses, sports industry is getting severely impacted if they are not fast enough in producing highlights and key moments and pushing it out for the users to watch it. Everyone with a smartphone today can create a key moment and instantly publish it on social media. But as a broadcaster who's spending millions and billions of dollars in acquiring rights, you need to be faster enough to kind of get these out to your audience, to monetize it in different ways, to engage your audience, to drive your subscription. And when you're doing these activities, which are severely impacting your top lines, you need to have tools that can also solve the problem of time here mainly, and also eliminate a certain level of efficiency problem that gets created when you do it manually. That's where we step in. We use artificial intelligence to drive understanding and insightful insights to kind of create key moments and highlights from live events. So if you guys have been watching cricket, you guys have been watching football, you guys have been watching other live sporting events, you probably interacted with our technology at the back end already, because we're the one that drives creation of key moments and highlights across various sporting events, not today only in India, but globally. What we've also done while doing this is we have kind of started defining use cases not only in the sports industry but also in the media and entertainment industry, news also being one of them. A lot of news bites that we kind of see these days are short form content that people really just want to scroll through and consume. Usually what happens is in our daily lives and the busy time that we kind of have these days, people want to kind of consume the knowledge but at the same time do it at the shorter form. That's where we really come in. We help create bite-sized content instantly using all the actionable items that we can. We run OCR, we run vision analysis, we run a lot of player tracking, we run facial recognition to understand what important aspects are there in the content and instantly publish it for the platforms to show it to the users so that they can consume this content shortly. So that's in short what we do. Like Rahul added very nicely, that AI here today in the market has been disrupting a lot of industries. We've been hearing that AI has entered healthcare. We've been heard that AI has entered media and entertainment. Probably it's going to be there in the asset management. It's already there in the asset management. What AI really does is it solves a problem of efficiency mainly. And when you're looking at AI as a solution, you're looking at kind of getting work done smartly. It's not a matter of fact that it's going to eat into jobs. It's mainly that it will get your job done easy. In that matter of fact, if companies don't adopt to the newer age technologies, they're probably going to be left behind. That's why you see a lot of the companies today coming up with their corporate innovation programs, which drives kind of adoption of new age technologies. And that's really what AI is all about. Just kind of improving the way technology is used today, getting job done probably at a fraction of a cost or even faster than what it was getting done in a legacy methodology. That's exactly where it really fits in today.
I think just very quickly, as far as AI is concerned, I think we are now getting insights, we're getting interconnectedness between different variables across time zones, and the knowledge base of human society is accelerating very quickly as a consequence of AI. And like I said, it has consequences not just on the economic sphere, but the social sphere, the human sphere. I think overall, every aspect of our life is going to be impacted by it. But I want to quickly weave in one more theme here, and I think, which is the fact that today, India is a very different India. I mean, I've been working a fairly long time, but today you see an entrepreneurial energy which I have not encountered in my career so far. And you'll find young entrepreneurs, and we have two of them where we have the good fortune of being the lead investors in both of these companies. But to my mind, it also is a symptom of the times where the entrepreneurs of today in India are not necessarily simply looking at the Indian marketplace, but their goals, intentions, purpose is to dominate the entire global marketplace in the spaces which they try and address, and the kind of problems which they try to address. So maybe Rajat, you can give us some idea of the cost infrastructure of your company and the competitive advantage you have on a global scale, and maybe Vinayak, you can do the same, just so that we have a context of how we intend to compete globally and be world leaders in these spaces rather than just simply be Indian players. I think maybe we've lost Rajat. Vinayak, would you just share with us
Absolutely,
about the
Rahul.
opportunity set?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Rahul. What we have really focused on, right, while we're building this technology of, as in simple terms that we call it a editing tool, a live editing tool, we also started looking at the global markets. And the reason why we started looking at the global markets is because we truly believe that we can build great companies out of India. And that's why we have started focusing on the global market, building cost efficient models, having teams built out of India gave us a competitive advantage because we were able to kind of do things faster. We were able to kind of be at the, I would say, at the backyard and kind of look at the global markets, look at how different geographies are pricing a technology like this, and at the same time maintain profitability. When you're trying to expand, a lot of times, companies tend to kind of overdo things which end up kind of resulting in excess cash burning situations, or results in kind of going a little aggressive when you're expanding to foreign markets without realizing. We've always kind of kept unit economics at the heart of the company, right? We have done everything very efficiently in terms of understanding what each market really means to us. When we are expanding and when we are saying we are going to take an editing tool, that really means that we are going up against some really large players in the industry. The companies like Adobe or Final Cut Pros of the world that have been legacy companies now. When you say that we're going to become an editing tool, and now our phase 2 is about launching a consumer first product, which is going to allow anyone and everyone to edit content on cloud. We wanted to make sure that our profitability, our cost centers are always in check. Though obviously we have been aggressive in the last 12 months in expanding specifically, in the Southeast Asian market, the European market, the US market, which is a key focus for us. We have also kind of taken the key advantage that we've built great team out of India. We have been able to kind of scale the product to a certain stage, and that has given us a competitive advantage to kind of look at different markets, look at the pricing, look at understanding how things are changing on a daily basis, and experiment. We keep experimenting a lot in terms of how we're innovating the product and kind of keeping it ready, or probably in competition with the foreign players that we go up against. But at the heart of everything, I think what's really happened in the last 12 months, and we've been fortunate enough, and I would say blessed enough, to have some great partners like Mr. Rahul at Bearings that have supported us throughout the journey. That has kind of given us a different perspective. Has given us a lot of, I would say, insights in terms of expanding into global markets. At the same time, ensuring that our cost centers have always stayed healthy. We have kind of made every decision basis on what will be a competitive advantage, what will be efficient for us in the global markets. And the entrepreneurship side of India has kind of been visible to the world in the last 12 months. Everyone has been seeing how globally Indians have been, expanding their footprints, and how overall ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, has been flourishing over the last 12 months, very specifically.
Right. Right. Vinayak, so great having you on the show and giving us all that insight on how media, the face is changing, and we couldn't agree more. And Rahul Bhasin, great to get in all that perspective from you as well on newer avenues of investing.